Can you guys hear me now? Is it okay now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you guys for joining. I'll introduce Warren. Warren is uh, the PM and delivery manager with Kramer Asia Pacific, one of the leading national and international engineering firms in the country. So today, Warren will be taking us through a webinar titled "Design Thinking in Civil Infrastructure." I think it's a very important topic, and one that should redefine how we view design, especially in the infrastructure space. So thank you, Warren, for your time and for committing to this. I'll hand it over now to you to probably introduce yourself and then take it on from there. Thanks, Warren. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Puri. Hello everyone. My name is Warren Lamour. As Puri briefly mentioned, I work with Kramer Asia Pacific. We service clients across a number of different industries. We're pretty fortunate that one of those industries is in the civil infrastructure space, where we're designing public spaces for use of pedestrians and motorists within the public space. We also operate with clients in the resource sector and energy sector as well, plus a number of others. For this presentation today, I just wanted to focus mainly on the civil infrastructure, particularly around for the movement of people within our public spaces, and really, I wouldn't say challenge, but maybe offer a different perspective. Very frequently we get given design briefs, and us as engineers, we go away and do our work, and try and produce a technically sound solution to a problem. But sometimes the user isn't really put into the development of the design or the solution that we are developing. So without further ado, I'm just going to go into the outline for this presentation. So we'll be covering four main areas. So the framing or the need for the change, design thinking in particular, plus other related frameworks, applying design thinking, and enabling the changes, for us to be able to use design thinking within the civil infrastructure space. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the initial part of my presentation, we're talking about some of the issues with our projects that we try and deliver. Now, these issues, I've got a couple of them up there on the screen at the moment. These are directly taken from a McKinsey report that was done in 2024. We can see up there that there's increasing project complexities, with the development of urban or brownfield sites. There's existing utilities that we have to compete with. There's a number of really difficult constraints that we are often have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. There's a regulation around our industry, on the construction industry. Sometimes it's not clear. There's also the various, I think in PNG more so, the land issues are quite a significant part of our projects. Land boundaries, resumptions, these are all things that add to the complexity of a project. But there's a number of others there. There's probably one of the other key ones up there is the skilled labor. So I think in PNG, it's fair to say we've got an issue there with our skilled labor force that's available for our civil infrastructure space, but I think that's also broadly across the rest of our industry. Right. this is an interesting graph taken from the same article. Now, this goes back as late as 2000 through to 2022. Now, there's three lines that are shown there. The center line is the productivity for the total economy globally. You see there manufacturing, its productivity has increased quite, dramatically compared to the average. And at the bottom there is construction. So I think that this only covers since the year 2000. But I think if we were to go even further back beyond that, I think it's fair to say a lot of the mistakes or issues that we are facing, or the issues that we are having to deal with, they're probably the same as the issues that were being faced 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So we probably then need to start asking ourselves, why are we repeating the same issues or the same problems from one project to another? Now, I think those first two graphs are just talking a bit more high level from the economy perspective, but if you look at this slide here, this is probably more focused now on our individual teams. So there's a number of there's six there that I've got up, but I'm sure we'll be able to find others. These biases or barriers, they sometimes they force themselves into projects or into group dynamics that a lot of times actually hinder the development of projects. So I'll briefly talk about a couple of them. So groupthink, I think, sorry, I'm going to skip over groupthink for now. I'll talk a bit more in depth about that one after this slide. But confirmation bias. So I think sometimes we've made assumptions on a project previously, and we go to the next project, and since that decision we made worked on that previous project, we sometimes by default, not through any fault, we go through and we apply that same assumption to other projects. There's a status quo bias. So I think that, as the name suggests, it's where you don't really try to challenge what's been done already. And I think that the statement that sometimes we struggle with is it's always been done this way. So the next person in line just ends up doing the same thing. I won't read through all the rest of them, but there's sunk cost fallacy is the other one there, where money's already been spent on a project or a program, and sometimes the decision makers or engineers, project managers, they don't want to realign the project just because so much effort, time, and money has already been spent. So they continue to head down a bad route with a project. I did say I just wanted to talk a bit more about groupthink, because I think this is one that we sometimes fall into within our space, because we fall into a room, I guess, where we tend to say yes to each other too quickly, and we agree too quickly. And that sometimes leads us is there's maybe someone with a good idea, they'll never feel comfortable or safe enough to bring up that new idea. There's also the lack of diversity in the way that we think, and I think it's part of that issue is we're all just engineers and we all sort of think alike, and we probably at some point age might also play a role, seniority, where we just listen to the oldest person in the room, and not challenge or constructively challenge the ideas. I think there's the obvious issues there around team collaboration, but I think one of the more catastrophic things are critical risks might be overlooked, because someone who might know about a risk they probably don't feel that they can speak up about that risk within the group setting. So these first couple of slides were probably, I just wanted to give everyone a quick high level and then probably more on closer level with the team dynamics and some of the things that we want to use design thinking to sort of redirect our approaches. Might just skip over this slide a little bit, but there's where we one of our big issues is problem definition. We sometimes jump into a project and we end up spending a lot of time resolving issues that aren't always the most prevalent ones that we should be trying to resolve. Got an image here, but we'll come back to this image a bit later. But it's just probably talking a bit about the public spaces that we have to design for. So this is for those of you who might not be familiar. This is Waigani Drive, and this is forget the name, but that's the major bus stop in Boroko there. Right. So now we'll go into the actual body of this presentation. So I think I mentioned to this something along these lines previously, but I think with design thinking, we want to spend a lot of time defining the problem, but also defining the problem from the different stakeholders and the different end users. We also, as we walk away from this presentation, I do want you to spend some time to question the design brief or the project brief. Ask yourself, are you resolving the issues that are at hand, or are you resolving issues just because that's what's in front of you? So design thinking, there's 5 key parts to this approach. The first one is empathize. Second one there is define. Sorry, I'm not sure if you can see that clearly. Probably shouldn't have chosen white. Then we've got ideate, prototype, test. But the idea is that that's a continuous cycle. Now, the actual approach or the concept of design thinking was originally rooted in the world of design and product development. But I think over time, it's now being widely used in education, in governments, and mostly in project management. It focuses on the stakeholder needs, collaboratively defining the project goals early on before too much effort is done in the engineering space. And it's really about delivering the value for the stakeholders. And it also really challenges the normal or the norms of project management, where scope, time, cost, quality, they're all really emphasized. But I think this just makes it so that the final product really resonates with the end users. A bit more in depth now into the design thinking. So within emphasize, is probably what I want to sort of draw your attention to there is the methods. So site visits, I think that's pretty common with our business as usual for us that work in civil infrastructure space. Interviews are probably not as common, and probably the same thing goes for stakeholder mapping. So these are probably I wouldn't say that they're not newer approaches, they're just different approaches that we can take into our projects to understand the end user. As we sort of move along, we're going to define. So we are asking ourselves now, how do we actually use the solution? So we're starting now to sort of scope up what needs to be done, and then we move into the ideate, where we're actually we might draw wire diagrams or mind maps, etc., to figure out how people are moving through a space. And I think at this point is where we really want all project members to really speak up, because we really want to battle this group think where it's just one or two people speaking on behalf of the rest of the group. Then after that, we're going to the prototype space. So, for some of us that are using Civil 3D or 12D or other engineering software, we might be doing 3D models. We might be able to do a fly through or walk through, and then probably feeding into this test phase where we really try to think about some scenarios where people are actually moving through the space. What happens on a day-to-day basis, what happens in the case of an emergency or a fire, how do people evacuate, all of those sorts of things sort of happen in the test phase. But what we'll see is that it looks in on itself and it goes back to empathize after testing. Right, we'll be going through the slides a bit quick. So I think what we probably try to do with this with design thinking is we are trying to bring the systems or the processes that we are used to in the traditional sense of engineering. We want to bring that and probably use it or use design thinking to enhance what we do traditionally. And I think it's fair to say that our or the way that we operate as engineers or in this space, I think naturally we go through an iterative process of design development. I think one of the key issues there is that iterative process of developing the design might only be done by other engineers. We aren't bringing in, as an example, a lady who might be selling items at a market. How does she move through that space? Have we made it easy for her? For someone that's using a wheelchair, how do they access different levels of a facility? There's all of these things that we want to bring in and want to bring those user groups or representatives of those user groups into that space where pretty early on in the project when we're defining what needs to be done, we've got this different user groups, the stakeholders that will be able to tell us, does this solution actually end up resonating with us? There's a couple of tools or items here that you can either take note of or some of you will probably already be familiar with them. There's the traditional interdisciplinary design reviews. That's where you might have a civil engineer looking at a hydraulics team's design to probably critique it from a different perspective, and vice versa. But it also helps for the teams to know how the different disciplines actually end up coming together. The devil's advocate role. So this is probably good for someone who's not necessarily part of the project day to day, but they might sit in on a meeting or a workshop, or maybe even be given a set of drawings, and they might come in and play devil's advocate and really try and poke holes in the design. And that robust challenging does actually end up with a much more robust design that can serve the stakeholders. There's a couple of others up there. Hazards and HazOps. It's probably those of you in the room that are in the oil and gas space or processes space. You're probably used to seeing them. Safety and design workshops. So in Queensland, safety and design is a government is a legislated part of project development. So you have to have shown that you have carried out a safety and design workshop. Within those workshops, you look at a project from the perspective of various different user groups. So you look at it from, say, you're a pedestrian, you look at it from a motorist perspective, but then you also look at a project from a asset management team perspective as well. And what does it mean if you are putting light posts too close to traffic? Does it mean you have to use traffic management when you're doing maintenance, or do you build do you put in guardrails, or all of these items? You bring in all the user groups into a room, and basically each user group sits there and just criticizes the design. But again, these are all things that uh, end up having real value or adding real value to a project. One of the ones up there is, and I'll speak about it in the next slide, is the double diamond. So I think if you've attended one of my other talks, this is a topic that I really like advocating for, because it's something that I probably picked up, let's say maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And it's become so relevant in basically all of my projects since then, because it offers a framework where we can actually probably go back to as a default. Um, so there's four key parts to it. There's the discover, and then you define, then you develop, and then you deliver. So I'll just go through this diagram. So if you're to take anything away from my talk today, this is probably one of the things that I'd really probably want or encourage you to take away from this talk. So the as the name suggests, there's two diamonds. So the first part is the problem space. So within this this period of the project, you want to get as many of the parameters in to guide your design. So you basically want to rip up the brief that's been given to you, and you want to question it, and you look at it from various different perspectives. Um, and this is also where you might do some extra research to help defend some of your questioning. But once you've done that, openly within a group, you slowly start to converge, and you really start to define what the problem is. Once you've done that, so you'd have found some insights through various people. You would have probably built up. You'd start to understand some underlying themes behind the problem, and you get to this point in the sense of the two diamonds there, where you've got a really well-defined problem, which makes the second part of this probably a bit more easier. So in the second part, you want um, your various team members to offer solutions to the actual project, and this is again where we're battling groupthink and the various other biases that I spoke to earlier on. So in this space, we want to expand on varying points of views and evaluate each of them as we go along, and we might knock some out. We say, oh, that's probably not relevant, or we'll take that on board, but probably to a less degree, because there's this competing priority that we need to bring up the list. But also during this time, we've got a design vision, we've got a hypothesis, and we're starting now to converge to the actual final solution. At any point along this converging timeline, there is opportunity to go back if other variables do pop up, and you just go through that iterative process. This is probably a bit more of a detailed version of the same diagram, but Google, YouTube, there's a lot of information out there about how to apply this. Go on to the third section of our presentation, which is applying design thinking. So I mentioned this image, sorry, I showed this image a bit earlier. I think there's probably this particular roundabout intrigues me because our KA office is not too far away from here. It's just a bit south of the intersection. There's a few things that was often stuck in traffic moving through here, so I end up people watching, which is probably something I shouldn't admit to, but I do like to watch how people move through public spaces. So just on this next slide, it's probably some observations that probably aren't any surprise to people on the call. One key or one really obvious way that we can see how the engineering or the design team may have missed the mark with the end user. And you'll see this all throughout, at least throughout Moresby, you'll see a lot of desire lines. So desire lines are where, a footpath has been designed for the end user or the public to move through, but the desire lines are the lines that the everyday pedestrian ends up taking. So I've highlighted a couple of them here in this particular roundabout intersection, but if I flip back to this colored one, you can see them there, pretty obvious. Yep, so through here, and I'm not sure whether you guys can see me pointing, but I am pointing. So I've highlighted them again through here, and whether you're driving or you're walking through this intersection, I'm sure you are well aware of some of the behavior that does occur through this intersection, and it's probably pretty common across some of our other spaces. I think it's fair to say that we've in Port Moresby and probably throughout PNG, we've got the majority of our public are traveling via public transport. So there should be a bigger emphasis around how we design these bus stops and interchanges between major bus routes, because we see some of the issues here. So I've drawn here in this orange line a typical route of someone getting off a bus on this southbound lane. They'll end up getting off and they'll follow that orange line if they want to get to the southwestern corner of the roundabout. And probably the same same thing goes for people wanting to get into Boroko down the road towards Boroko police station. They're not getting off the bus and walking back up to cross the overhead bridge to come back down and walk all the way back to that point. That's why they're using that northernmost desire line to basically cut across traffic, even though there's fences there blocking people. There's probably an argument that our footpaths that we allow for in our urban spaces within Port Moresby, they're probably too narrow. And I think this is pretty evident with the space or the line here that I've drawn in yellow, which is probably a safer route for the public to use. But I think a lot of the public won't use that route, obviously, because the orange line is a quicker way to get to that point. But also along where that tree line is, along the yellow line, that footpath there is quite narrow. It's probably 1.2, 1.5 meters wide. With the majority of our public taking public transport, there's an argument there that our footpath should be our minimum width of our footpath should be a lot wider than they are. Um, we're not going to delve. We're not going to solve this problem, in the rest of this workshop. But I did just want to highlight with this because it's something that we, as residents in Port Moresby, would be quite familiar with, uh, and it's hopefully at some point, ourselves, hopefully, but obviously yourselves on the call as well. If you are in the engineering consultancy space and you're doing civil infrastructure projects, you do get to look at a problem like this and try to resolve it with your clients because um, it's quite a interesting but also multifaceted problem to try and resolve. There's obviously the competing priorities with the motorists, but also against the pedestrians or movement of pedestrians, and obviously the asset management teams or the cleaning teams or light um, uh, repair teams or teams repairing guardrail. There's all of these competing stakeholders. On to the next one. So I think I might have already spoken to this a bit earlier, but the key. These are probably some key takeaways from this talk. So you want to create shared ownership early. So the earlier you bring on particular stakeholders, the earlier they can buy in, and their interests are being looked at. And you develop or you sort of reverse the design brief to incorporate other stakeholders' needs. Right. So I've spoken about this, and I fully recognize that a lot of these suggested solutions, they're not going to happen overnight. We are up against really traditionalist ways of doing things, and we're also up against budget constraints, and we're dealing with, the uh, learned behavior of people as well. So it's a very complex issue that we're trying to resolve, within this, or trying to cover within this talk. But and there's a lot of things that need to happen in the background in order to enable design thinking to sort of permeate its way through project delivery. So I do fully recognize that. So I did just want to bring out this last part to talk through some of the items that we, as an industry, maybe need to start moving slowly towards. So probably I'll let you look at these points sort of talk to them, but I do like the idea of pilot projects because they give the client and the consultancy, plus a contractor, the environment where they can collaboratively work together and also tr try something new, whether that's a new design, new material, or a different contractual setup as well. These are all things that we probably start doing sooner. But also within our own teams, there's uh, there's a tendency for us to pick up a problem and just go and try and solve the problem as soon as it lands on our desks. But I think revisiting or regularly revisiting the problem is a good way to, stay on task. But one of the issues, or um, I guess what are they called, a theme from decision makers is how is this new approach actually going to help us? Because it's whether it's um, the financially it'll help them, or collaboratively, within the team. I think there's probably a couple of examples up here of how you can actually measure the impact or the positive impact of design thinking. The one that I do like is the reduced RFIs, because within the design space, if you can, it's a metric that I like to base the success of a design offer, because we've spoken a lot about the end user, yeah, but I guess there's also the other users of your design who will be the contractors, and how they use your design. Because it's, if you're, I guess if you're in the consultancy space, you should be tracking your RFIs and the nature, or the topics that your RFIs are being picked up. If you're always getting issues with, just this is an example, but if you're always getting issues with reinforcement detailing across various different projects, then it's probably an internal thing where you need to look back to your structural team or your drafting team and say, look, this is an ongoing theme with our reinforcement detailing. We need to fix it, because in the last 6 projects, we've got 5 RFIs for better detail around this particular, or around reinforcement. But I can probably speak from experience where the allowing your graduates and your intermediate, your principal, senior level engineers and drafters to critique a design. I think it ends up actually building a good culture. And I think you'll obviously have your early adopters, and the ones that are lagging will usually actually end up being some of your biggest advocates once they get once they start to understand the positive impact. Just gonna go to the next one. So and I hope there's some management on the call today, or even clients, because they're probably quite key to some of these approaches being adopted. But the leadership is quite or they play a significant role in actually rolling this out, because it starts from the top down, because it might need your enlightened client to come on board, but also needs your leadership within your organizations to actually allow people the space to actually talk, and I guess bring their full selves to a project and really question the project. And I know I've focused mainly on the civil infrastructure space for public use, but I think it's probably something that can be adopted throughout other areas of engineering as well. Okay, so design thinking in digital era. So another enabler to using design thinking more regularly, to the point where it becomes part of the everyday way we do business, is the implementation and the use of BIM or 3D models. But also if you're doing traffic modeling, using the right software to actually simulate the movement of traffic. I know there's software out there for modeling the movement of pedestrians and people through public spaces, like bus stops, stadiums, hospitals. That interaction. I think another big one in the PNG context is the large trucks that drop off fruits and vegetables at markets, Broker Market, Gordon's Market. There's no dedicated spaces for them to actually unload their cargo. They're either taking up car park spaces, or even worse, taking up road space, which is, it's something for us to observe, but we find a way around it. But if and when the opportunity to upgrade a road within the vicinity of a market does come to you, it's probably a good idea to look at it more broadly and question yourself, how can this project actually end up benefiting a bunch of other people rather than just, widening a road. So yeah, I guess this probably goes back to us questioning the design briefs or the project briefs. But yeah, I do really like the use of BIM and digital engineering to help facilitate some of these conversations. And just last couple of points here. So, and this is probably for yourselves to take away. We do want to probably encourage all of us on the call to even go back and advocate to your teams um, internally to talk about, how can we reframe a problem if you're facing a project at the moment and, some of these items that I've spoken about does resonate with you. Feel free to reach out. I'm always keen to catch up for a coffee with people who are interested enough to talk about this type of things. I'm I do like the idea of probably spending a lot of time defining the problem with your clients. I know some people sort of might either raise eyebrows or not probably not be fully on board, but I think if you can spend that investment upfront or the time investment upfront to define that problem, I think you end up with better project outcomes. And I think we probably all, fair to say, we've experienced either being an end user or being affected by an end user who's maybe been adversely affected by a new project. So I'm going to wrap. That's probably the end of my presentation for now, Puri. Um, I think yeah, I do like to end my presentations with a final thought for the team or for the attendees to walk away with. But I'll probably open the floor up to some questions now.
Yeah, thanks, Warren. That was very insightful. Thank you so much. I think we'll take on some questions. We've got about 15 minutes left. I think someone raised their hand briefly. Not sure if someone raised his or her. Yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to either type it in the chat or you can just ask the question straight to Warren. Yeah, so open to the floor now. Eunice, you can ask a question. Take the silence as a no. And then you have a question to ask Warren. Yeah. Um. Yeah. Geez, I think no one's going to ask a question, Warren.
Yeah,
um.
no, that's absolutely
I think
fine.
it was well explained. Great presentation. They all well understood it. And Mark Zerike, do you have a question that you want to ask Warren? I think Mark is on mute. All right. Thanks, Warren. Yeah, really appreciate the time. We'll definitely share the recording with everyone as well as the presentation, FYI. But then again, on behalf of IEPNG, mostly Warren, thank you so much for your time for this very insightful presentation. And like Warren said, if you ever need some guidance in your approach towards engineering design, please feel free to reach out to him. And he also did point out that he's open to having coffee catch-ups as well if you'd like to have an in-depth discussion with Warren. And yeah, thanks Warren for your time. Really appreciate it, and thank you to everyone that's online. And we look forward to the next one. Thanks, Warren. Appreciate it, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks, Josh.